when Thomas asked me to do the talk, we thought about a couple different options, and then we hit on this film because freedom and constraint, your overarching theme for this, for the seminar, language and things as I understand it, is so central to Blow Up. I mean, it's really, I think, the key to understanding and unlocking the film. And we'll talk about why I believe this is so. From both aesthetic reasons, philosophical reasons, and also political, historical reasons, the dialogue between freedom and constraint. Secondly, I think Antonioni, and this is maybe what my book, A Cinema of Poetry, wants to contribute, is I think he's a great humanist. He's often not seen in that regard, but I think a lot of Antonioni's films have to do with not so much defining the human. I think that's more of a kind of 21st century academic question that's permeated a lot of curriculums, and rightly so, because we live in an age where the boundaries of what is and what is not human is constantly blurred and porous, but more in the tradition of humanism, which is a Renaissance Italian philosophy, concerned with what it means to live on earth as a rational, and more importantly, moral being, and the decisions that a human makes and how they fit into larger context. So I'm going to talk about those issues today, and the film Blow Up, but I'm going to put Blow Up in a broader context than Antonioni's other films. That's what I think the value added that I can give you today is, and hopefully inspire you to want to see some of his other films. So let's start a little bit. Who is this guy, Michelangelo Antonioni? I would say that he has a famous quote, Antonioni, fare un film e vivere. Any Italianists in here? Fare un film e vivere. To make a film is living. For him, making a film and life were inseparable. Antonioni, in fact, was someone who died only recently, in 2007, I believe. And he was born in, I think, 1912. So his life spanned the 20th century, which is also another way of saying his life almost spanned the history of cinema. Cinema as a medium, technically speaking, is roughly born in the late 1800s, when the Lumiere brothers make the first movie camera in the 1890s. The factory workers exiting a Renault factory, I think it was in Lyon. But anyway, it's a relatively young medium. And Antonioni is born at the beginning of it, and then he comes of age in a dramatic fashion. After World War II, in the height of the rebirth of the Italian film industry, a movement called neorealism. Neorealism. Keep that in mind. That's the movement that defines Antonioni and many other directors. I think neorealism, as I write about it in my book, I call it the ultimate Italian film school, right? They didn't go to NYU or USC. They worked on neorealist films on the set as scriptwriters, as assistants, and whatnot. And it leads to a profound question for filmmakers, the question in the history of Italian film, which is so relatable to what we do at Bard College. I co-directed first-year seminar for 4 years. I think my greatest contribution to the curriculum here since I've been here about 12 years. The question that we looked at, one of them is, what is the real? The real. It's what we could call in literary critical terms one of those infinitely malleable signifiers, the real. We say now, get real, right? We say all these expressions. You've heard of realism. What is it? Is a painting by Michelangelo realistic? Not really. I mean, people don't really look like that. You ever seen the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel? I don't know many people who look like that. Even in like the best gyms in the world. You know, incredibly muscled figures, male and female. And yet that was known as a realist turn away from medieval art, which was flatter, more two-dimensional, right? Less rational depiction of nature, space, perspective. And then we have literary realism in the 19th century. You've read Jane Austen, some of you. There's a big distance between a Jane Austen novel and a Flaubert novel, which was written only 50 years later. One is more classically realist, Flaubert. One is really romantic. It's In Italian film, the movement neorealism had taken over. In the film that you saw last night, or recently, a couple nights ago, I'm not sure, that was in direct response to the real and neorealism. Antonioni wrote one of the most brilliant essays in the history of film, I believe. It's called The Fact and the Image. And in this essay, he talks about the director's responsibility to facts and their relationship to images. And he takes a very counterintuitive turn. He says the fact, the literal real, does not belong in film. What belongs in film is the image. The image. And he talks about being in Nice one day. And he says, I was leaving Nice, I was about to go work with the great Capnet in France as an assistant. And it was right about the world was going to World War II. Right? There was something in the air. We had pinned all our hopes on the Maginot Line. I know you've done work in World War I. I think that LCT is here. The Maginot Line, this the imaginary line of defense that had been constructed. And Antonioni says, I walked out of the hotel, I walked along the beach, and I heard a sharp cry. And it was a swimmer who was drowning. Actual death. And he says that was the fact of the scene. And it happened to have been someone who, he talked about the colors, he talked about the black skin of the person who drowned against the white backdrop. He talked about all these details, the white sand. He talked about this desolate coastline. And he said the first thing that I have to do as a director is separate the fact, the death, this horrible tragedy, the death of the swimmer, from the image. What is the image? The image is this desolate beachfront, this open expanse of sky and sea and sand that somehow captured to his mind, and this is a term that crops up in figures like T.S. Eliot, the objective correlative, that somehow visualized and instantiated this internal anguish and feeling of existential, weight that he felt as Europe was about to launch itself into this incredibly bloody carnage, which some argue, ended, most argue, I would say, ended Europe's kind of hegemony as the global leader at the end of World War II, which a lot of people see as the political continuation of World War I, right? I'm not saying anything new here. But for Antonioni, what's key is to separate the depth of the swimmer, the fact, from the image. You have to think about this a little bit. It's a little bit sort of counterintuitive, right? Wouldn't a realist representation go right to the swimmer? Let's think about this as we approach the film Blow Up, okay?